you will have heard, and it is the case, that News Group have paid a substantial sum in damages to me. Now, why would they pay the former executive director of Hacked Off and someone who spent about 10 years trying to expose them and has been the bane of their lives, or at least a pain in the neck, or they may even have a lower opinion than that? And the reason they've done that is to prevent the allegations I make and others being heard in court. And so they've been prepared to spend millions of pounds, in fact tens of millions of pounds, and now over hundreds of millions of pounds in damages and compensation to people and in legal costs in order to prevent a trial which would cost a lot less. To my mind, that indicates that they cannot tolerate some of the things coming to light that would come to light in a trial. They want to keep those allegations out of court. The way the system works, and this isn't understood, is that if I get an offer more than I can hope to get from the judge, then if I refuse that offer and get less from the judge, then I'm liable for all the costs of the trial. And in a case like that, that would bankrupt me and almost every claimant. That's why people settle, not because they don't want to have a final determination, and not even because they want to take the money that's on offer. The allegations that I make, and there are any number that could be made, include these. That in 2006, it's clear from what I've seen, and I make this point in my statement, that the Sun obtained illegally the itemised home phone bill of my associate and friend, Simon Hughes, at the time he was running for the Liberal Democrat Party leadership, and outed him against his will as bisexual in an article that was frankly intrusive and homophobic. And we know from disclosure in this case that the editor of The Sun, Rebekah Brooks, knew what the source of the story was, an illegally obtained phone bill. She knew that it had been obtained by a private investigator, and despite that, she sent a series of emails, which we've seen, directing how the story should be run and forcing Simon Hughes to do an interview in order to get the story written in a nicer way. I don't believe that's an isolated example. It's part of a pattern. And that's what we've seen in this litigation. And my number was one of the numbers on that bill. And that's how I knew I had a claim. When I brought the claim, I found to my horror that for 3.5 days, Mazza Mahmood's surveillance team had been following me in 1998 to try and pin something on me. And if anyone knows Mazza Mahmood's history, you can imagine how worrying and what a close escape that must have been for me, given that so many people who were innocent of anything that he accused them of have gone to prison on the basis of his false stories, his false evidence, and his false statements to the police, the prosecution, and to court. And I was that close. And there are plenty of other people out there who were the victims of him, who clearly had their data obtained by him through phone hacking and other unlawful means. I found that there were hundreds of calls to my mobile phone. Now, much as I'd like to think that I was of interest to the Sun and the News of the World when I was an MP, I was not. Those calls are unexplained, and they've not given a legitimate explanation for those calls. So we say that those were calls to try and get hold of my private information. It's amazing what steps News Group will take to undermine our case with the noise behind me. Worse than that, I found that those calls persisted after I was an MP, while I was working for Hacked Off and with the victims of phone hacking who were giving evidence at the Leveson inquiry. I found that there were calls to my associate Tom Watson that aren't explained, that there were private investigators' invoices showing that illegal activity had been conducted in November 2011 against Hugh Grant, my colleague from Hacked Off, who was giving evidence to the inquiry at that time. So at the time that he was in a high-profile way alleging that it wasn't just the News of the World, the Sun were paying a private investigator to carry out unlawful credit checks against him. And again, that's set out in my statement in open court, and we've seen the evidence. Particularly concerning is that we've seen hundreds of calls to Vince Cable MP, who at the time, when some of those calls took place, in the second half of 2010, was in charge of considering whether to prevent or to more closely scrutinise Rupert Murdoch's bid to gain overall control of B-Sky B. I think that's a huge affront to our democratic process that a cabinet minister and privy councillor, subject to not only those regulation, legal and commercial secrets, but also to security secrets of this country, had his phone listened to, which I believe is the only satisfactory explanation of the hundreds of calls to his phone and the dozens of calls at the time this happened. These have been set out in detail in the particulars of claim of his cabinet colleague Chris Hughes, which is or will shortly be a public document, showing that at the time the bid was launched, there were calls to Vince Cable's phone. At the time that meetings took place with his junior minister, there were calls to his phone, which we say, and this is Vince Cable's view as well, represented phone hacking. Finally, of these allegations, and there are many I could use, it's clear to us, and we say this in the statement in open court, that there was an effort to delete millions of emails from 2011 onwards, after the launch of Operation Wheating. So you have a crime scene, the police are interested in getting the information, the data, the evidence from emails, and during that investigation, millions of emails were deleted. On the knowledge and instruction, we say, of Rebekah Brooks, the Chief Executive of News International, Will Lewis, the General Manager, recently proposed to be a regulator at Ofcom, amazingly enough, their legal director, their IT director, and their legal manager. These are senior people involved in these deletions. One of the things I mentioned in my pleaded case, and I mentioned in the statement in open court, is the only justification that they've given for this deletion is that they heard that there was a data leak, that someone had told them that they knew someone who was selling Rebekah Brooks's email data to Gordon Brown and Tom Watson. And that was the basis they used to do the deletions. But they didn't just change the passwords on their emails, they deleted emails and they scratched the backup tapes. I ask you, if anyone's bank account was compromised, you changed the password, you wouldn't open your safe and burn the cash in that safe. That's what they did, allegedly as a result of this rumour. I've been told by both Gordon Brown and Tom Watson that is categorically untrue. Finally, I want to state why I'm so aggravated in particular by their conduct. Because I brought my claim when I saw this information. They say that I always knew, because I was an expert on phone hacking, I must have known the Sun were involved, and I must have known the News of the World were targeting me, because I'd been at Leveson inquiry and ran hacked off. Well, that means that they say I was wrong to believe their sworn evidence that the Sun wasn't involved and that the News of the World's activities were restricted to a handful of people on the news desk and a short period of time at the features desk. It's just an impossible position for them to hold, both that the Sun wasn't involved and that I should have known the Sun was involved. They can't have it both ways, and that needs to be exposed. I'm grateful to you for coming today to hear what I have to say, because so much of what I've said simply is not published by many of the newspapers in this country. I should have said, by the way, that I want to thank my legal team for bearing with me during this claim. They tell me that I've been a wonderful client, very well behaved, not trying to do their job for them or in any way interfere with their judgments. And that's Roddy and his team and David Sherborne behind me. And by the serious look on their faces, you can see that they endorse what I've said 100%. Thank you very much.